The last thing we need to talk about in this chapter is cellular respiration. Respiration, or cellular respiration, is the process that releases energy by breaking down sugar when oxygen is present. And the key part to this is that oxygen must be present for this process to take place. So the formula for cellular respiration is the glucose and oxygen are put in, and as a result, I get carbon dioxide, water, and energy. This should look familiar to you. Do you remember the formula for photosynthesis? If you remember back, we have carbon dioxide plus water gives us glucose and oxygen. And remember that we needed some sort of input of energy for this reaction to happen, and that energy came from the sun. So if you take a look at these two reactions, you'll notice that cellular respiration is the opposite reaction of photosynthesis. We said before that photosynthesis only occurred in photosynthetic animals. In other words, not photosynthetic animals, photosynthetic organisms, in other words, plants or algae, and some prokaryotes. Cellular respiration is going to occur in all organisms because all organisms need energy. Again, you must know this formula. This will not be a multiple choice question on an upcoming quiz or test. So the first part of cellular respiration is glycolysis. Glycolysis is the first stage in cellular respiration that occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell. In glycolysis, one molecule of glucose is broken in half and forms two molecules of pyruvic acid, which is a 3-carbon compound, and ATP. So if you look at the image below, we have glucose. It's put in with 2 ADP and 2 phosphates. As a result, I get 2 ATP and my pyruvic acid. In other words, a 3-carbon compound. This whole process makes 2 ATP. And as we go through these notes, I would like you to keep track of how many ATP is formed through each stage. After glycolysis, we have two possible pathways. The first one is anaerobic respiration. Ana meaning without, aerobic meaning oxygen. So without oxygen. Sometimes this is called fermentation. Again, it occurs when oxygen is not present. This happens in the cytoplasm of the cell and directly follows glycolysis. There are two types of anaerobic respiration or fermentation. The first is alcoholic fermentation. This forms alcohol and carbon dioxide, and as a waste product, it also forms NAD+. NAD+ is used in glycolysis. Alcoholic fermentation occurs in the production of things such as bread, and it's what helps it rise. Lactic acid fermentation is the other type of fermentation that can occur. This produces lactic acid and NAD+, and again the NAD+ is used in glycolysis. Lactic acid fermentation occurs in your muscles. So if you've been working out for a really long time and your muscles really start to ache or hurt, oftentimes it's because there's a lactic acid buildup, meaning that your muscles didn't have enough oxygen to continue producing energy, and as a result went into this fermentation process. The second pathway it can take is aerobic respiration, and it's going to do this when oxygen is present. Aerobic respiration occurs in the mitochondria of the cell. So let's take a minute. What type of cells have mitochondria? Do plant cells have mitochondria? Do animal cells have mitochondria? Do protists have mitochondria? Do fungus have mitochondria? If you think that all of these have mitochondria, you would be correct. And aerobic respiration has two pathways that it takes. Again, it follows glycolysis, meaning it comes after glycolysis. The first pathway it's going to take is the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle breaks down pyruvic acid, and if you remember what pyruvic acid was, it was a 3-carbon compound that we got when we broke glucose up during glycolysis. It takes this pyruvic acid and breaks it down into carbon dioxide. As a result, NADH and FADH2 are produced. These are electron carriers. This process makes 2 ATP. So remember, I asked you to keep track of the ATP molecules that each process is making. This one makes 2. The next pathway is going to be the electron transport chain, or ETC for short. This uses high energy electrons from NADH and FADH2. In other words, it's going to pull electrons off of these two molecules in order to change oxygen into water. Now, the electrons get pulled off in the form of the hydrogen molecules, and you'll see that I take my oxygen and I add hydrogen to it, and as a result, I get water. This also makes ATP. Notice this one makes 32 to 34 ATP molecules. So if you had a choice, would you want to do glycolysis and fermentation, which only makes 2? Or would you want to do glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain, which makes about 38? I would choose the electron transport chain option. So let's take a look at how glycolysis is occurring, as well as the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain, as well as where they occur. So imagine that the page in front of you is a cell, and that this darkened area is a mitochondria. Glucose goes into the process of glycolysis, and as a result, I end up with ATP. After this occurs, I can do 2 different things. I'm going to form pyruvic acid, and my pyruvic acid can go into the Krebs cycle. As a result of the Krebs cycle, I'm going to get ATP. In addition, glycolysis forms NADH. NADH is going to go into my electron transport chain. The NADH and FADH2 that's produced from the Krebs cycle is also going to go into my electron transport chain. As a result of my ETC, or electron transport chain, I'm also going to get ATP. Again, this darkened area is a mitochondria or a mitochondrion, just the mitochondria. Remember, we called it the powerhouse of the cell. Powerhouse meaning that it produced energy. Do you see how it produces energy now? So how does photosynthesis and cellular respiration relate? Well, in photosynthesis, sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water are taken in, and as a result, I get glucose or sugar and oxygen gas. In cellular respiration, glucose and oxygen gas are taken in, and carbon dioxide, water, and energy are given off. Notice they're exactly opposite of each other. The one difference is that my photosynthesis is going to occur in plants. And for the most part, it only occurs in plants. Remember, we have some exceptions in the form of algae or prokaryotes, but for the most part, it occurs in plants. Cellular respiration is going to occur in all organisms, all eukaryotic organisms, or all eukaryotes. I would make a note of this so that you remember it later. So if we take a look at this image on the side, you'll see that my oxygen is produced as a result of photosynthesis, and my carbon dioxide goes into my plants to produce this oxygen. During the day, my plants are going to do photosynthesis, but since there's no sunlight at night, they can't do photosynthesis. This is the time they're going to take to do respiration. So although they're able to make their own food, they need to take that food and convert it to energy, which is why they also do cellular respiration.